Chapter 30. Conviction. Orzammar was teeming with excitement as we arrived. Unlike the typical warm welcome I received whenever I returned, this energy was different. The people were already celebrating, dancing, toasting drinks, and merrymaking. Farron and I shared curious looks, and I called to a nearby dwarf as we made our way up the pass that would lead to the gates of the city. "Sir, sir!" I called to the dwarf, who seemed well into his cups at this point. He turned and looked amazed at who was calling him. He hurried over and bowed. "Princess Oridum, it is an honor to speak with you. How can this humble craftsman serve you?" I waved my arm to motion to the rest of the cheering dwarves. "What is going on? What has everyone in such high spirits?" He looked up at me in surprise. "Has word not reached you yet, princess?" I arched my brows. "Word of what?" "Your brother's child has been born, princess," the dwarf answered. "A baby? Stop!" I shouted. "Don't tell me! Farron, take my Bronto to the house and meet me at the palace," I shouted as I dismounted and handed the reins quickly over to Farron. Farron laughed and tools the reins to my Bronto. "Of course, my love. I'll be there shortly." I nodded and sunk into the stone, molding it so that it opened up beneath me, and then commanded it to push me along quickly through a bubble through the mountain. I'd been practicing moving through the stone for some time now, and I finally had a reason beyond experimentation to use it. It took only moments for me to emerge at the palace entrance, startling the guards. "But, princess?" one of the guards started. "Apologies for the strange arrival, but I'd just heard about the baby," I explained. I quickly added, "Don't say what it is. Just please allow me entrance." "Oh, of course, princess." The other guard nodded as the pair opened the door quickly. "Thank you," I shouted, as I scooped up my dress so I could run without tripping over it. I rushed through the palace, taking the halls quickly in practiced steps. At this point, most of the older guards knew to simply open the doors and laugh, as they had seen me do the same thing since I was a child. The newer guards no doubt questioned the veterans, but none dared stop me. I burst into Trian's chambers, finding him and Nerav sitting with father near the fire. I was all smiles and energy, and completely ignored everyone except Nerav and the swaddled child she was holding. Nerav laughed and simply offered the baby up to me as I approached. "Well, I see you've heard the news." I carefully took the babe into my arms and tucked it close to my bosom, taking in the sight of the child as I ran a finger over its cheek. "Only just now, and what is your name, little one?" Trian chuckled and stood, moving over to hug me gently and accept a kiss on the cheek in return. "His name is Durnan." I gasped and looked down at the baby. "Durnan Idukan. Did you know that the ancestor who shares your name was a Grey Warden? He served valiantly in the Western Approach and brought great honor to our house. I have no doubt that you'll prove to be his equal at the very least." "Don't put such high hopes on the lad just yet," father hummed, but smiled and shook his head. "We don't know his mind just yet." "He is an Idukan," I squeaked at Durnan as I rubbed my nose to his. "He is destined to do great things for his family and his people." "Oh," I chirped as Durnan reached up and grabbed my nose. The tender touch of the baby's grip brought a laugh to me. "You see there, he's already grasping for greatness." "You realize you just called yourself great, yes, sister?" Trian huffed. "She doesn't lie," Farron replied as he entered the room, quickly closing the distance between the door and the rest of us. "Farron," father hailed him, "how was the journey, lad?" Farron bowed to everyone. "It went well, Majesty. Young Balin seemed well on his way to getting settled as the Lord of Gwarin, and we found the information the princess was looking for after the assault on the Proving." "She is your betrothed, Farron." Father smiled and chuckled softly. "I think you can call her by her name now." Farron bowed his head. "Of course, Majesty. Forgive me. I'm still used to the formalities." "Your family now, Farron," Trian said as he clapped Farron's back. "I dare say Merida has considered you family since you were brought into service. Now we all consider you such. You're welcome to speak frankly with us." As the others were speaking, I was thinking over the implications of Durnan's birth. He represented the future of our family, the future of our people. He was the first of the next generation of Idukans, and I couldn't help but think that he might not live to see his potential fulfilled if the current threats I knew of remained at large. A shadow grew inside me, and my chest tightened as I understood what had to be done. Farron, I said, my tone somber. Yes, my love, he replied, his tone reflecting that he understood that something was wrong just by hearing how I spoke. Ready the warriors immediately, I said as I turned toward him, Durnan clutched close and my expression deadly. Full deployment. Every warrior, every Bronto. We're mobilizing. At once. Farron nodded and turned on his heel, marching quickly out of the room. Trian, Father, and Nerav looked around in confusion. Merida, what's wrong? Father asked as he stood. I'm sorry, but I need to put an end to something. I kissed Durnan's cheek and handed him carefully back to Nerav. What is it? Trian asked, stepping forward and grabbing my shoulder. Tell me, Merida, what has you in such a mood? I looked up at Trian. There are 2 enemies we need to put down as soon as possible. I know for certain where one is, and I intend to attack his fortress. You're certain he's dangerous enough to warrant your entire house? Trian asked. And then some, I nodded firmly. He threatened all of Thetis and every living being, Durnan included. Then you will wait a month. Trian's tone brooked no negotiation. House Idukan's forces will join you. I will help you kill this enemy. You need to stay with your new family, I argued. No, Farron glared at me. I need to protect my family. We need to protect our people. This is our duty as Idukan. If this enemy is strong enough to threaten even you, then all of Orzammar should be ready to go to war. He is a powerful mage, I tried to explain, on par with my own abilities or even stronger. I can't guarantee I'll succeed, but I think I can. All the more reason for you to have reinforcements, Trian said. Call your fated friends and see what aid they can send as well. I can't, I sighed, realizing that truth in the moment. Except for Triana and Alfric, I'm not confident they won't send a warning to the enemy just to gain favor and be allowed to live. Then call who you can, Father insisted. We must do our best to guarantee your success. If this mage is as powerful as you believe, then we should send word to King Marek and request the aid of Templars. They can help against this mage. I didn't like the idea of waiting, but Father and Trian made good points. If I were going to attack Solas, it wouldn't hurt to have a larger force at the ready. However, that large of an army would send alarms ringing throughout the Frostback Mountains and ensure that Solas knew an attack was coming. He likely considered one would be coming eventually anyway. He'd remained in Skyhold since I'd suggested it, but getting any information from that place was difficult, even for the spy network I'd established. I took a deep, calming breath. Don't call the men from Idukan Thaig. Prepare the royal army. Prepare as many banners as there are soldiers. I'll send letters today for allies and meet with you this evening. I think I may have a plan. I left the family with a determined urgency. By the time I reached House Oradum, Jarvia was waiting for me near the entrance. Farron had contacted the network and informed them that they would likely be needed. Jarvia made it her responsibility to answer the call. Jarvia bowed low. Princess Oradum, I was told you had need of us. I nodded and motioned for her to follow. Accompany me inside. I need our fastest messengers and deliver letters, and I need our best scouts to get every ounce of information they can manage to get from Skyhold. Are we finally moving against the elf? She asked with an eager tone. Indeed, I responded as we weaved our way through the halls of the estate. When is the next shipment of goods to be delivered to them? I believe the next shipment is supposed to leave in a week's time, Princess, she replied as she went over the schedule in her head. Have some of our people who understand masonry to go with the expedition with the premise that we will be looking to improve the foundations of the keep as part of our agreement, I instructed. And what will they be looking for as they inspect the foundations? Jarvia smirked. We entered the study where I usually did my paperwork, and I moved to my desk, gathering parchment and my inkwell. I didn't pause as I began to pen my letters. Defenses, both mundane and magical. I also want to know if they can discern where Solas is staying within the keep. In general, I would prefer to get him alone and not involve the elves he has with him. As you wish, Princess. Jarvia waited patiently as I wrote my letters. I will ensure they are exacting in their detail. Would you like us to prepare demolitions? I shook my head. No. If nothing else, bring building supplies and shore up the weaker spots in the foundations so that they will believe we're preparing to do the work. Very well, Princess, Jarvia chuckled. She rather enjoyed seeing my mind put to more devious use. She found the juxtaposition of my friendly, sociable demeanor with my cunning and devious side that allowed for the changes I was making in dwarven society and keeping our people safe. I sent letters and specific instructions to King Marek and Traiana and Elfric. I had Jarvia take them and ensure their delivery, with directions to tell our allies to follow the instructions inside the letters exactly. I didn't want to risk raising any concern on Solas's part. Over the next month, King Marek, escorted by a group of Templars clad in royal armor, traveled to Amaranthin to visit Kylan, Alistair, and Serena. The three of them, along with the Templars, were then secreted into the deep roads and guided to Orzammar. Meanwhile, Traiana and Alfric announced they would be leaving for Orzammar to congratulate Trian and the royal family on the birth of King Endrin's first grandchild. They brought a small party of elves with them, as well as presents for the royal family. We waited a few days after everyone had arrived to meet for discussions on the true reason for their visit. We gathered in the throne room where a table had been set up for food and drinks. At the head of the table was Father. To his left was Trian, and I was to his right. Next to me was Farron, then Traiana and Elfric. On Trian's side of the table sat King Marek, Kylan, Alistair, and Serena. Father cleared his throat to gain everyone's attention through the small talk that was being made. I want to thank you all for your timely arrival. I have heard tales of my daughter's friends and allies, and it does my heart good to see you all respond to her call for aid. King Marek, my old friend, I am especially pleased to see the respect you have shown my daughter in answering her request. It speaks highly of your opinion of her. Marek bowed his head. King Endrin, your daughter has proven to be a steadfast and trustworthy ally. She has aided my people several times, and I hold no one in higher regard than her. With everything she has done for relations between our people, the least I could do is answer her call for aid. Would that she had only asked for more. I feel like this is nowhere near enough to compensate her for her efforts. Father smiled at me, his expression one of admiration and approval. She has done wonders for both our people, which is why I should point out that I am here as a representative of our people. Merida will be leading this meeting while my son Trian represents my army. I pray you all heed her words and consider her request carefully. I smiled at everyone. I would like to thank you all as well. I know the letters I sent you were rather demanding and particular. I also know they were secretive. I appreciate the trust you showed in me by following the instructions. I want to assure you here and now that those instructions were crucial to ensuring our chances of success. But success in what endeavor? Serena leaned forward and asked. It's time we dealt with Solas, I stated grimly. You want us to kill Solas? Traiana gasped. Merida, you must know how fractured our people are on that issue. I nodded apologetically. I understand. However, he is only growing in power. The only thing slowing his growth is that we've denied him access to Flemeth, and we've collected every Alluvian within a wide distance. But these won't stop him, and we fated understand the threat he poses. Perhaps you like to enlighten those of us who aren't fated as to the threat he represents, Marek suggested. Traiana raised a hand to signal that she would explain. Solas is better known as Fenharel, the Dread Wolf. He was originally believed to be a myth, part of the elven pantheon in a sense. In our lore, he is said to have tricked our gods and the Forgotten Ones by locking them in their respective realms. In truth, he betrayed our leaders who had enslaved our people and posed as gods. He then tore the world apart, separating the physical world and the Fade, and placed the veil between them. He now wishes to correct this action and reunite the spiritual and physical worlds together again, Traiana continued. Doing this would kill nearly everyone in Thedas. He will strive to save as many elves as possible, but he will not care who else dies to see this goal to fruition. And you want to stop him before he can achieve his goal, Kaelin said. I do, I replied, nodding and adjusting my post to seem more confident. I already have people in place doing reconnaissance in the keep, and I believe if we arrive as a delegation seeking to dissuade him from his goal, we can catch him off guard. You believe he'll allow us into his keep fully armed and armored? Serena asked doubtfully. I believe he will think we are a delegation with normal traveling armaments, and understand them to be the standard equipment nobility carries for their protection, I countered. The large amount of dwarves will be understandable since it's the prince and princess of Orzammar, as well as dwarven craftsmen coming to the keep as I promised. The contingent of human knights to protect the king would be expected as well, The same can be said for the elves accompanying Triana and Alfric. So we look like we're arriving with a normal amount of protection, asked to speak with Solas about preserving Thetis as it is now, Alfric summarized. Then you expect us to simply attack him when we meet with him? It sounds simple, but I think he would suspect something like that, I nodded, understanding the slightly doubtful tone Alfric used. However, I believe we can lure him into a false sense of security by dragging the talks out over a number of days. When we think he's complacent and has his guard down, we strike. We attack him while our forces secure the keep. Do you mean to kill the elves with him as well? Triana asked, surprised at the aggressive plan. Not if we can help it, I shook my head, my face showing hesitancy. I would prefer we only have to kill Solas. If we can keep the elves secured while the attack is happening, it would be best. And if they fight back? Alfric pressed, wanting a clear answer. I will not allow my people to attack without being able to defend themselves, I answered firmly. We'll do our best to keep any fighting or casualties to a minimum. But the question becomes, what do we do with them afterwards? They've been indoctrinated to believe in Solas's vision. They will not want to return with you back to Ostagar, and may attempt to rally more elves into attempting to achieve his goals by some other means. Are you suggesting that we should execute them for their beliefs? Triana's eyes went wide. When all they are guilty of is believing in Solas's vision for the world? I'm not suggesting anything, Triana, I sighed. I'm saying that we have to recognize that they're also a threat. They're elves, though. I would suggest their fate be up to you and Alfric. That is, if King Marek agrees with that decision. I believe that is probably the best solution, Marek agreed. We see Ostagar as a vassal state of Ferelden, and thus see Alfric and Triana as its rightful rulers. They should decide what will be done with their people. We appreciate that, Highness. Triana bowed her head, then turned to look at Alfric. If I'm being honest, we hadn't considered this. When the time comes, we may not be in the correct mindset to make the best decision. We take them into custody and decide on their fate at a later date. As is your prerogative, Lady Triana, Marek smiled. There is also the option to put them before a tribunal of those which they threatened with their actions, Serena suggested. They may be your people, but their actions threatened all of us. You will be seen by your people as fair for allowing them to be taken into custody, and seen as a stalwart leader for allowing them to be tried by those they threatened. Your people will not see you responsible for the decision of a tribunal, so you escape blame in that regard as well. That's a rather inspired idea, I had to admit. We'll consider it, Alfric sighed, not liking the conversation one bit. I could empathize. It wouldn't be an easy decision no matter what. I have a question, Serena looked at me from the side. What happens if, after a few days of talks, we convince Solas to give up on his goal, and we believe him? What then? Do we risk believing his sincerity when the fate of all of Thetis is at stake? Marek asked. If we can't risk it, then we are all simply agreeing to go there and assassinate him, Alistair bemoaned. For all we know, Solas is essentially immortal, Trian thumped a fist on the table. Even if he feigned sincerity, he could simply wait until alliances fracture or manipulate events over the long term so that he can fulfill his goal. Do we really want to take the risk that he will not once again take up his desire to destroy our world? Do we want to leave the generations to come at his whim and mercy? I looked at Trian and wondered if I should tell him that Farron and I, now touched or blessed by the Titan, were also essentially immortal. My expression must have given something away because he seemed to grow curious. I thought quickly before responding. I didn't think you were the type to think generations ahead, brother. That's rather encouraging. Then you should know better, Trian scolded me. The goal is to kill this bastard once we get there. We can pretend for a few days, but the moment his guard is down, we should strike hard and without mercy or remorse. We have all answered Merida's call for aid, Serena interjected. She answered ours when we asked for her help in Ostagar. She answers Triana and Alfric's when she noticed they were in danger. She recently aided Alan in checking on his family. She has put her life and time on the line whenever we have needed. And we all understand the threat Solas represents. If Merida believes now is the time to strike, and she's asking us to help her, we would be hypocrites of the highest order if we refused. Triana and Alfric looked at each other as Kylan and Alistair both voiced their agreement with Serena. I knew the position I was putting the elves in, and I didn't want to, but this needed to finally be done. I looked at Triana with an expression that sought her answer. Triana sighed and reached across the table to place her fingers on my hand. Serena speaks the truth, Merida. You kept me safe when I was brought to Orzammar. You helped me unite the clans, and you've been like a sister to me ever since we met. You've helped us in so many ways that it would be wrong of us not to help you. Elfric stood and nodded. Understand that aiding you was never in question. The fallout is what concerns us. But we should not have let you think there was any hesitation in giving you our support. Whenever you're ready to march, we're with you. Just one more question, if I may. Serena's tone was suspicious. What's that, Serena? I asked, guarding myself for what she might be curious about. I can't help but notice Alan isn't here. She paused before bluntly posing her question. Why is that? Truthfully, I don't trust Morrigan with this issue, I answered flatly. By that extension and for that reason, I didn't trust bringing Alan with us. I believe Morrigan could sway him to aid Solas if she were inclined to see the world he would want to bring about. She doesn't have a child to care for at the moment, so her loyalty is too much of a risk to bring the college mages into this. That, and representatives from the college, wouldn't fit into the delegation narrative we want to sell. Serena seemed to weigh every word for its worth, her consideration of the explanation clear. Eventually she nodded and sighed. I can't fault you for your reasoning. I understand. Are there any other questions? I looked around the table. With no other questions forthcoming, I nodded. Then I suggest we spend the next few days going over our delegation proposals that we'll use during our talks, and also form a plan of attack when the time comes.